The other thing I'd like to show you how to do is how to add images to your photo library. So this is our simulator, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get an image that I got from the internet called The Giver. So what you do, simply you just go ahead and drag and look at this. You can drop inside of the simulator. Once you drop it there, you can see there it is. Okay, let's run our app one more time here. So run, click select photo, and look at that. There it is. We can select that one, select this photo, and we have the photo called The Giver. That's just a little thing I wanted to show you. And you can add, of course, as many pictures as you want. Now we're going to learn how to create custom views. So we are going to dive in and create a rating view. So that way at the bottom here, users will be able to rate their book. To be able to rate a book, users need a control that lets them select a number of stars. So there's different ways to implement this. For now, we're going to create all of this in code and then tie it all up with our storyboard. Let's go ahead and start by creating a subclass of UI view, which means we're going to create a class that inherits everything from the UI view class. So we're going to go ahead and create a subclass of view. So let's go at the bottom here where it says plus, hover over and you will see it says add new file. You could also accomplish the same by say Command N, right? So we're going to go ahead and say click that and say file. Now let's go ahead and say Cocoa class. Okay, make sure we are under the source, iOS source, Cocoa class, and we're gonna name this rating control. And subclass, make sure we select UI view. So you click on this drop down menu, get UI view, make sure it's Swift, say next, and make sure it's inside of our book tracker there, say okay. And this is what you're gonna have. So let's get rid of all of this. We don't need. Now we have our import UI kit. We have rating, which is a subclass of UI view, which means rating inherits from the UI view class. That's good. So we have that. From previous lessons, we know that when we have a class, we need to initialize it. Initializer to initialize the class. But since we know also that we are inheriting from our UI view has its own initializer. So we need to use those to set things up. Let's create a mark here. Again, a good way to organize our code, say initialization. Initialization. Type in init, and you can see there's a few inits there. But now just let's go ahead and take the second one. This init that we have here will take care of everything that we need in order for our rating control to work, because this init is actually coming from UI view and is passing in a decoder, which is type NC coder. So don't worry too much about that if you don't understand for now. Just know we are initializing. We created our init method initializer of our class here. Now we have an error here, so click on this. It says required modifier must be present on all overrides of a required initializer. So just say insert to fix it. Say enter, and it says required init. So now what we need to do is actually call a super. Say super dot init. Take the first one, and we pass in a decoder. Okay, so now we're initializing the initializer of our parent class, which is the UI view. Again, we're just setting things up for our rating control to be usable. So now that we have this, we have to go back to our main storyboard and actually get a view, right? Because we need a view to put our rating control inside of it. So we need to go ahead to the right here. Let's go to our library, object library, and look for view. Just type in view. So there is a view there. What do we need? We need to put right below our photo image view there. So drag that and put right there. Perfect. So there it is. Let's make it a little bit smaller. That's really good. And while we have that selected, let's go to our size inspector here. So click on that size inspector. We're going to make a few changes here. Before we go any further, bottom, change this to placeholder. And here we need to change these numbers to something else. Let's put about 44 for height and about 240. That's fine. Say enter. Okay, that's good. With that selected, let's go to our identity inspector here. So click on identity inspector. The identity inspector allows us to set to which classes our views belong to. So in this case here, we can go ahead and change and go ahead and select rating control. So click on that. Now, what are we saying? We're saying that this view here belongs to our rating control Swift. In fact, let's move this to inside there. That's good. So that's what's happening there. So now we have set the custom class, a rating control. It's going to be controlling our view here, which is exactly what we need. Now let's go ahead for testing purpose. We're going to go ahead and add a button here inside of our view. Up until now, all we've been doing is creating our user interfaces using our storyboard. So we would come here to our object library and type in, say, button, and get a button and put it over there, right? It turns out whatever you can do using the main storyboard, you can also do in code. That is the beauty of programming. So we are not just limited in doing things using storyboard directly, because there are times when you're creating an application and you need things to be done in code, like a dynamic. Let's say if you want to create an app that creates 25 buttons dynamically, and when users touch in one of them, they disappear, they do this and they do that, they have animations and all that stuff. How you do that? Well, you need to do that in code, because then you're able to generate things dynamically in code and control things that way. So that's what we're going to be doing. So let's go back to our rating control here inside of our initializer after our super.init. Create a button in code. Now we have never done this before, but this is going to be very simple. So let's go ahead and say let, we're going to name it button is equal to UI button. So that's the class used to create a button. And to the right here, you can see right away it gives you a description of the UI button class. So it says an instance of the UI button class implements a button on the touch screen. A button intercepts blah, blah, blah. So you know all of that. You can go ahead and read yourself. So now we need to pass in a few parameters, a few things that will allow the system to actually create a button. So we need to use a frame to create a button. So we're going to go ahead and select the second one. We need a CG rect. So essentially we need a way to tell the system, okay, where are the X values and the Y values of the button, the width of the button, and so forth. Because that's what we need in order to create a button. We say frame here, it's going to be CG rect, right? This is the class that used to create rectangles. Okay, so now we need to pass in our arguments in a form of points where we X, Y values and width and height, right? So we want our rectangle, CG rect, you can create using floats or just points. So we can go ahead and use the third one. So the first value for X value, we're going to just go ahead and say 0. The next Y, 0. The width, we want to have a 44. The height, we want to have 44 also. And once we have that button, what we need to do, we say button. We want to change the background color. Say dot background color. There it is. And we can go ahead and say is equal to UI color dot red, because we just want to create a red color. That's how you create a button. Very simple, right? You just create a button variable and you instantiate UI button class and you pass in a rectangle with all of the necessary coordinates, right? You want to be at 0, 0, right? So X0, Y0, width of the button is going to be 44, the height also 44. And then we say we want our background, button background, to be red. Now, in order for actually this to work, because now we've created our button, in order for us to actually see, we have to add this button into our sub view. Just think of it if you are a painter of some sort, right? You can, in your mind, you can create a little painting, all right? This is maybe a terrible example, but think of it in your mind as a painter, you can create a little painting, real simple painting, but it doesn't work until you actually paint so that you can show the people. Put on canvas, that way people can see. So we need to put this button, this artwork that we've just created into the canvas so people can see. And how we do that, we go ahead and say add subview. As you can see, the add subview method allows you to pass in a view, in this case a button, because a button is indeed a view. So say enter, and we pass in the button we just created. Now that we have that, we need to do something else. Notice that our rating control is a subclass or is a child class of UI view, which means we can then override certain methods that come with UI view. So one of the methods we need to override that comes with the UI view is the intrinsic content size. This will allow us to match the size we specified earlier when we created our view here, this view. go back to our size inspector, you look intrinsic size here, right? So you notice all of these properties here, we are able to access them in code. Okay, so that's what we are trying to do. So let's go back to our rating here. So here we need to override the intrinsic method here. So we can say override func intrinsic, their intrinsic content size. It's of type CG size, so it returns a size. So at the bottom here for code, we go ahead and say we want to return CG size. Okay, we pass in the width of 240 and the height of 44, because that's exactly what we set up. Let's go back here to our storyboard and you see 240 width and 44 size, right? Because that's the size of this whole view here, to which we are inserting this button we are just creating here. Let's go ahead and check this and see if it works. We should see a red button. Let's run this and look at that. Whoa, wonderful. We got a button. Right? It's not doing anything now, but at least we're able to dynamically encode, customize, we create our own button. Now notice how wonderful this is, because we can do a lot of things with our buttons, with our views when we customize them. We change the color, we decided where we want it to be, X and Y, so it's real at the top here, okay? And width, we decided we wanted to have a 44 width and a height of a 44. We decided to have a background color, and we can change all of this. But one of the most important thing you always have to remember, you have to add to the view. You have to add when you create any button or any item in code. You have to always remember to add this to the actual view, because that way you are able to show or see on the screen. That's a very common mistake. We understand that all buttons have to have one functionality that we all know and agree upon, which is event. So you have to click on it and something needs to happen. Since we are actually creating our own buttons here in code, we are now responsible of adding all the properties that we need this button to have or to do, or functions to do. Because in the button that we have been using that comes with Xcode, all of that is done for us. But since we are creating our custom buttons, now we need to actually add all of those actions to our button. What do we do after our overridden function there? Here we can go say mark. Again, this is good for commenting your code. Say button action. So we're going to say func. We're going to create a method here. Say rating button tapped. Okay, we're going to pass in a button of type UI button. Okay, because that's what we're going to passing in order to retrieve, to fetch the event. Let's give it more space here. So inside here, let's go ahead and say print button pressed. Notice that this button, rating button tapped, we are passing in a button of type button. So we're just passing in our UI button here because we want to make sure that we are connecting to the button that is being clicked. This is not going to work for now because we are just creating the function that which will be called when people tap the button, but we need to connect it. Remember, this is all manual that we're doing. This is all custom based. So there's a lot of things we need to do in order for the button actually to work. Not a lot, but a few things we need to do in order for the button actually to work. So this is halfway through. The next thing we need to do is actually to connect the button to our rating button tab, the function here. Right after we have added the button into our view, subview, what we need to do, we need to say button, which button, this button we created, dot, function we need is add target. You notice this add target, it says adds a target and action for a particular event or events to an internal dispatch table, which means it just allows us to attach an event to this button here we have created. Enter. Now, look what we have. We have a few parameters here. We have a few arguments. The first one is the target. What is the target for this to work, for this button? Well, the target is self. Well, because it's the button here, right? What is the action? The action, we have to pass the method which we created, which will needs to be called when is tapped, when this button is tapped. So here it's just a string. We're gonna call rating button tapped, which is exactly the name we created here for this method. And the next thing for control events, what we need to do, we're just going to go ahead and dot touch down. And you notice there's a lot. If you go ahead and say dot, look how many different event controls you have here. So for now, we just want the touch down. Okay, so let's go ahead, save this and run. Tap, we should see button pressed at the bottom here. So tap, and a lot of things happen. Something is not right. We need to go and make sure we fix them. It says rating button tap unrecognized selector sent to instance. Okay, so we made some mistakes. Let's go back and revisit our code. Okay, let's see what's happening here. I made a mistake. You actually have to do the following. When we put the action rating button tap, at the end, we always, this is a good mistake, you have to put colon there. This will signify, will tell our system that this is what we are watching, we are attaching to the action to be triggered. This is what we need to do. Always remember that. This is why it was saying unrecognized. So we have to put the colon after our rating button tap, which is the function we are using here for button action. All right, so let's save this and run one more time. If all goes well, we should be able to get this working. So tap, and you see button pressed. Tap again, button pressed. Button dot set title, because that's the title where we're going to be setting. So you can see here, the set title takes in a string for title and the state of the UI control state. Say enter. For the name, we're going to say hello. For the state, let's just say dot normal, because we want it to show when it's just a normal state. And save this. All right. Run again. And look at that, it says hello. So button press. The same things we're able to do with Storyboard, we can do manually in code. Now you may say, well, this is a lot of work. Why would I even do this? Well, the power of being able to do this is that you can change a lot of things with your views, with your controls. Because now we have the power, look at this, we have the power to change the state, the colors, we have the power to do a lot of things in code dynamically. That's one of the advantages of being able to do custom views. Let's comment this out because we don't really need that. I just wanted to make a point. Now we need to go ahead and start putting together the actual control system. The idea here is to have a few buttons, a few stars. So there will be buttons. We'll have 5 of them, 5 stars. The users can tap on ratings. So they can say, for instance, the book they've read is about 3 stars, 4 or 1 or 0 or 5. Back in our rating control view here, right above our initialization, let's go ahead and put another mark. This time we're going to call this properties. So here is where we're going to put our properties for our rating control. The first one is going to be rating. So we're going to create a var, and we're going to call this rating and set it to 0. So that's our starting point. Next, we're going to say var rating buttons. And we're going to create an array of buttons, because remember, all of those 5 stars are going to be buttons, just like we were doing here, right? Create a few buttons. We're going to have 5 buttons. We need to create an array, which we can then use to put all of our buttons. So how do you create an array? So square brackets, and inside say UI button object there, okay? And of course, we need to finalize at the end. There we go. The other reason we're creating an array of buttons, and this will allow us to use a for loop and dynamically create all of these 4 buttons. So it's easier to put everything into an array. That way we are able to iterate through the array and while we create the buttons. Now let's say to create our 5 buttons, well, we know how to create buttons here, don't we? Right? Because we said let button and we create buttons, and we even added a color in the background. So we know how to create a button and how to even add tap events in our buttons. So what we're going to do now, we're going to add a for in loop around the last 4 lines, which are these lines here. So this 1, 2, 3, 4, because this is where we are creating our button. So we want to do, we're going to say for underscore n. We want to do this from 0 to less than 5. So this is a different way of creating a for loop. It's called a for in loop. What we're saying here is that our statement inside of our for in loop will have to be called 5 times. So if we actually take that last bracelet there and put it there, which means that we are including all of this inside now, all of the button creation will run 5 times, therefore creating 5 buttons. We know we have created here our rating buttons array, which is going to be an array of buttons. So now we need to use that because we need to put all of the buttons that we're creating inside of our array. So right before here where we actually add the button inside of our subview, inside of a view, we need to add this button each time it iterates through. We need to add the button we're creating, this button here, into our rating buttons array. So what do? We just say rating buttons array. We say plus equal and say button. So this plus equal, essentially we're saying we're adding a button each time this runs. So if it runs the first time, we're adding 1 button to our rating buttons. Second time, adding another button because we are creating different buttons at a time. Space there. Perfect. Okay. Now this is very important because you need to make sure that this is happening before we're adding the buttons into our view. That's very important. Now let's give it a run and see. Run. Something is not right here because we said we should at least have 5 buttons and we are just getting 1. Well, we're actually getting the right number of buttons. The problem here is that each time we are iterating through, going through this loop and creating our buttons, what's happening is they are stacking together. So they are all on top of each other, which is why we're not able to see them horizontally displayed. We need to do something else before we can actually see them horizontally displayed at the bottom here. So it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In order for this to work, we need to go ahead and override a function called layout subviews. This function will take care of lining things up for us. So under here, we're going to go ahead and say override func layout. We want layout subviews. So it's always a good idea to give it a read. That way you kind of know what's going on. So layout subviews, there we go, enter, and we can put our code here. Now, in our code, what we need to do, we're going to create a button frame. So a little frame where we're going to put each button. So what we're going to do is say var, right? We're going to call this a button frame. Now we're going to use the CG rect. So essentially we're going to create a rectangle. And then we're going to pass in a few coordinates here. So the first one, x, we're going to pass in 0 because we want to be at 0, 0. Y, going to be 0. And for the width, we're going to go ahead and say 44. Oops. Let's go back here. That's 0. That's 44. And the height, 44 as well. And now we are going to create, after this, we're going to create an offset for each button origin. That way we have all of them lined up correctly, horizontally, right? Because we want to make sure that our button, let's go back to, want to make sure that our buttons are horizontally displayed, not just stacking over each other here. So we're going to be offsetting the buttons origins so they lay out horizontally. Okay, what we do here, we say now we're going to create another for loop. So we're going to say for, this is another type of for loop. So we're going to say index, right? Because that will be the index of our array. Button, we're passing in a button, index button there. In rating buttons, right? Because we are going to iterate through our rating buttons, which, as you remember here, it has all of the buttons that we've been creating. So we're going to iterate through that enumerate. And inside here, again, this is just a simple for loop. So we have the index and button. So we now can use these as our accessors. So these are variables that we can use to go through our rating buttons, which is indeed the array which holds all of the buttons we've been creating here. Okay, so now what we can do, we can say button frame. Remember, that's the CG rectangle that we've created here at the top. Dot origin dot x. So we are accessing the x property of our rectangle. We're gonna set it to a CG float. So this is where we are actually offsetting it. Inside here we say index times 44 plus 5. So what are we doing here? We are taking the frame, so this rectangle that we're creating here, this button frame, because that's the frame of the button, each button we're creating. So what are we doing here? We're taking the frame of the button and we are displacing to the right, which is indeed the width. So now what are we saying here? We're saying that, okay, so the first time this code run goes ahead and create the button here, as you can see. And the second time, it displaces the second button just enough, 44, which is the width of the frame, the button, just so it displaces 44 plus 5, which will give it a little bit more space, just like that. That's all that's happening here. And then we say button.frame, right? We are now going to the actual button frame and assign it to this button frame that we've just set here. So say button frame. So that's all we're doing here. We're just like offsetting by 44 plus 5 pixels to the right. Because 44 again is the width of each button, right? The width here. We're saying create another one, but then go 5 more pixels to the right before you create another one. Okay, let's go ahead and give it a run. And look at that. There we go. We got 5 buttons here. And they all have that event as well. Okay, so we got 4 or 5 buttons there. So we are able to dynamically create a view and put all of these other small views, small rectangles here, or buttons per se, because we've added the tap event. And we're able to do all of this dynamically in our code. All right, so that is the power of being able to do things dynamically, because we can do this in code. We can adjust as the application runs. If you want to create more than 5, you can even put 8, for instance, and save. Let's give it a run. Look at that. There's more. Of course, some of them are going to be off the screen, but you get the idea. So let's go back to 5 here and save. Let's go ahead and do some cleaning up here. So right now, if we go to layout subviews, we have here everything is working fine, but it's a bad habit to hard code sizes, right? We have our 44 width and height. A good programming practice is to actually create a variable that we can then assign the value that we want to include in our width and height. So we can use that variable. And if we wanted to change at some point the sizes, we can just change in that variable only. So we don't have to go and track down every place that we have added 44. So what we can do now, we can go ahead inside of our layout subviews. I'm going to create a variable, let button size be equal to, we're going to say int because we want this to be an integer. Open parentheses, and here we're going to say frame, right, dot size dot height. Getting the frame height and assign it to our button size. That way we can use this variable as opposed to hard coding numbers. Okay, so now we can just change everything to button size. Again, this will not change in any way or form how this performs, but it's a really good idea because then we only have one place if we want to change the size, right? We can just change here where we declared our button size variable as opposed to having to change everywhere else. So that's just a good programming practice. So the other thing we need to clean up a little bit here, inside of our for loop, we are creating this button here. Now what we can do to change things here, we can say let button is equal to UI button. So here we just instantiating the button and we creating the actual button frame in our layout subview. So there was no need to keep that one there. Okay, so let's save this and run one more time and see if things are still working. They should be. Okay, we still have our 5 buttons. Now the next thing we need to do, we need to go ahead and change a few things also inside of our intrinsic content size. We'll create another variable, so let button size be equal, make it an int. All right, we're going to say frame dot size dot height. Okay, so we're doing the same as we did here. As you remember, we're just putting our sizes, height, and width into a variable as opposed to hard coding like we are doing here again. So that's what we're doing. Next, we're saying let width be equal to button size plus spacing times stars. Okay, so as you notice, we have an issue here. Spacing and stars. It's supposed to be variables that we set. So outside here, we need to go ahead and say var spacing is equal to 5. Var stars is also 5. All right, so now we have this here at the bottom should be working. Stars, that was my mistake. There we go. Perfect. Good. So now we have a width. So we're saying it's going to be the button size, which is this here where we went ahead and dynamically got the height of our frame. And then the spacing, we created these variables at the top here as properties. So what we're going to be returning here, we're going to go for the width. We're going to return the width, this variable here we just created. And for the height, we are going to return button size. Great. So nothing will change in terms of the application itself, but this will give us a peace of mind that we know that our code is actually cleaner and should perform better. Next video, we will continue working on this project here. We'll then start adding actual stars within our buttons here, right? Because that's the whole idea. We want to be able to add stars and people can click and the stars will start showing. All right. So good job so far, and I'll see you in the next video.